Near mint condition, the home of collected editions. And check out that eye, that's exactly what we want to see. Woo, look at that panel, baby. And that, as they say, is that. Happy Monday, all you minties. Uncanny Omar here from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions. And join me today for your advanced look at the Marvel Comics Library Hulk 1962 to 1966 from Taschen. Let's find out what is included in this huge, gigantic, Hulk-sized book. And welcome back, everybody. Now, before going any further, a big thank you to the folks at Taschen for sending us an advanced copy of this book. Now, this book is supposed to be released, like the actual release date is on June 14th or 15th, depending on where you get your books. However, overseas, they've already gotten their copies. So if you're wondering, wait a second, how is this an advanced look? Well, officially the date for release worldwide is June 14th. So that is something to keep in mind. And there's also a collector's edition available through the Taschen website. Now, I do want to state that this is a huge book. To kind of give you an idea of how big this is, I've done an overview, of course, of the X-Men one, the Silver Surfer one, and the Donald Duck one, the Ultimate History. But to give you an idea of how big this is, here it is compared to the size of an Epic Collection. And of course, the Epic Collection is a standard trade paperback size, meaning that the actual paper size of the paper is the same as a single issue. So this is just how much bigger it is. And next to the Marvel Masterworks, Volume 1 of the Incredible Hulk here. This is the remasterwork, so I will be comparing the internal artwork in here compared to the restored artwork that's in here. Now I'll explain what the differences is in a little bit, but this is more so you can get an idea of how big this book is. And of course, comparing it to the size of an Omni. So again, just how much bigger it is. And we'll compare the internal artwork here so you can see how big it is compared to an Omni, which to me is a huge book. And speaking of huge books, people have asked me to compare it to the size of an Absolute Edition. Now, this is an Absolute Edition inside of the slipcase, and it is that much bigger. What does it mean? It does not fit on your K-Like. It doesn't fit in your K-Likes. It does fit on it if you have enough room from the ceiling to your K-Lax. This is top shelf. It will not fit inside of a K-Lax or a Billy. Or I guess the Billy, but I would not recommend it putting on a Billy. This is a hardcover after all. The spine of the book here, the Marvel logo, the Hulk piece right there. Hulk, 1962, 1966, the Taschen logo. And then the back of the book right here, which is a piece from Tales to Astonish, number 75. Not all my power can save me. And then, of course, a little tale of Namor the Submariner. So, one other thing people have asked me to do is compare it to the size of a Mighty Marvel Masterworks, which is a digest-sized book, so it is smaller than a trade paperback. All right, no dust jacket, the art is on board, and it does have that almost like a cloth-like finish to it. Not sure. It doesn't really capture on camera. It does feel like it's a piece of cloth that is around the actual book. But we're going to open it up and talk about the stories found in here, because I've already done an overview of the Masterwork and, of course, the Omni and the the Epic Collection. And my daughters and I have reviewed it already in Mighty Marvel Masterwork format. But we are going to look at the restoration here, how exactly it's captured in this big format, and what extra goodies are in there. All right, let's go ahead and get this big book open. Here are your end sheets, which looks like this green negative they've taken. I love that. It's a small little detail that I enjoy because we are talking about gamma radiation. By the way, collected in this big book, and it will tell you here in a little bit, is the Incredible Hulk, the original first 6 issues. Then, of course, it ended up getting canceled. And then material from Tales to Astonish, number 60 through 83, and then the whole Tales to Astonish number 59. So the book has a total of 670 pages, and this like all the other Taschen big books, retails for $200. There is a collector's edition also found through the Taschen website, and those are very, very limited. Here is the breakdown. You have a forward by Al Ewing, and it is an amazing forward. The behind the scenes and the deep dive into the stories is done by Douglas Walk. And then you have the actual comics right here where it's starting, and then the history, the storylines and credits, and then the biographies. The histories is really cool. I really like what they do with the history and the storylines and credits. They give you a thumbnail, and then they kind of give you a small synopsis as to what's going on. Here is your forward by the phenomenal Al Ewing, who ended up writing The Immortal Hulk. But he's talking about what is the Hulk and how different of a character he is and what is happening. Then we are seeing some wonderful pages in here blown up, and by different artists, and of course Jack Kirby, and then different inkers like Bill Everett right here. This is the Bombs and Monsters. This is pretty much giving you a historical look as to how this all got started, talking about the monster comics that were around at the time, not just from Marvel Comics, but other comic books, and the importance of the Incredible Hulk, because Hulk was really the second ongoing comic by Marvel Comics featuring a superhero, but it didn't start off as a superhero. It started off like this monster book, and it is a good, I love reading stuff like this because there's a beautiful, to me, sometimes tragic, sometimes embarrassing history of comics, and I think it's very important, right? It's very important to me to have stories like this passed down, not the actual stories of the comics themselves, which we love and talk about, but the people that made them, the imperfections, and sometimes, you know, how these stories were kind of coming up on the spot. So a lot of things here about the Cold War and where we were, like, for the race to space. And in between there, you get some original artwork through here, which I think is gorgeous. I love that. I love the breakdown to this. It's one of my favorite things that Taschen does. And then eventually you do get to the actual comic book. So, let me actually get over here. It's a little bit of a long history, which I enjoy. So, if you don't, then you can jump straight to the comic book, which begins, I believe, in page... the Boomerang. What the hell were they thinking back then? 50, yes, 50. So you get this double page spread, and then you get the actual comics after these right here. So, here we go with issue number 1. By the way, if you've never read this stuff, I am going to talk a little bit about spoilers, because I have talked about this enough through the Omni overview, or the Masterworks overview, or the Epic collection, and my daughters and I have reviewed it. So the way that these particular books are done, the way the Taschen books are done, it brings you these books in these big, extra large format. And what they do is they don't go for original art, so it's a lot different than the art restoration that's something like the Marvel Masterworks. And they also created this paper stock that is just absolutely mind-boggling, that it feels like the old school kind of like newsprint paper stock that they were using back in the day, but not really. Like, it's not quite the paper stock. Like, so for the Marvel Masterworks, for example, they use a glossy stock, and some people, you know, think that that is not the best paper stock to use for the medium for these early 4-color comics to be printed on. So, because there's a lot of computer restoration that are done on those. And I'll do a comparison here in a little bit. What some people want to see are original comic book newsprint and Baxter paper. So this is kind of like a mix between both of those, and with this new type of paper stock. And it does feel, but the cover itself, and I've talked about this before, does have that glossy finish. So this does feel as close to the comic book, except in a big giant size. Again, taking photos and then restoring the photos. So it's a different process than what we're used to if you've been reading the Marvel Masterworks. All right. So the first issue of The Incredible Hulk, we are introduced to Dr. Bruce Banner, and of course the supporting cast of Thunderbolt Ross, his love, Betty Ross, and daughter of course, Thunderbolt Ross, and then his kind of partner in crime at the very beginning, and that is this guy named Igor. Because what they were doing here is kind of channeling their monster comics. They didn't really know what exactly the Hulk was going to be. So this is the way the Hulk looks, not as huge as you're probably used to. As a matter of fact, you know, his clothes are pretty tacked on after getting hit by that gamma bomb, after saving Rick Jones, this For some reason, this kid was out there in the testing fields, and Dr. Banner drove out there to save him. And in saving him, he got hit with all the gamma radiation. And in absorbing the gamma radiation, he turns into the Hulk. Now, also interesting during this time is they were still figuring out what makes the Hulk tick, what makes him transform. And one of the things that they started doing at the very beginning was, well, how about he transforms during the night? Say, like, at daytime, he becomes Bruce Banner. And then at nighttime, he becomes the Incredible Hulk. So it almost has this Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde type of thing going for it. And we do have a new villain here, the Gargoyle, who is working for the Soviets and wants to sell the gamma radiation information to them. But the beauty of this is that Bruce Banner, after turning into Bruce Banner from the Hulk, tells him, look, I can cure you of your deformity, and he ends up curing him. Now, of course, the Gargoyle is a character you probably aren't familiar with, but you may see his son later on. By the time you get to the second issue, you're going to see a big difference, and one of the big differences is that he's green instead of this grayish, although there's like a little bit of an orange tint, and of course that could be because of the paper stock, or of course some of the orange shirt bleeding into him. But it does look like just a little bit of orange. But he is green, and that's, of course, there's a whole history behind that, and later on it was retcon. Billy and Tommy, is it Bobby and Tommy? Bobby and Tommy playing in the swamp. Get your butts back home. There's a creature out there on the loose. You get a recap as to what happened previously. But in this issue, we are introduced to these alien creatures known as the Toadmen, and they're coming to capture the world's greatest mind, and they use him to enslave Earth, and they are known as the Toadmen. But yes, he is green here, again changing from day to night, but there's a whole thing as to lack of colors, and then they wanted to do more colors in this, and then miscommunication. Regardless, the Hulk is now green and will be green going forward. Later on, of course, it's retconned into the story, and that's years later, why he's gray and why he's green, and how they have a difference in like mental abilities, and then, of course, power abilities. And something ends up happening that they take him to space. Like, Rick Jones takes him... They end up taking him to space, and the gamma radiation has him stuck as the Hulk, and then Rick Jones is able to control him, so he really has to listen to Rick Jones. He's not just an angry Hulk. So this is before the whole emotional spectrum that drives the Hulk. And in here, we are also introduced to the concept a little bit later about the pulse, like if his heart pulse reaches a certain level, he turns into the Hulk, and if it goes a little bit higher, he turns into Bruce Banner, which really doesn't make any sense, especially with somebody that takes blood pressure medicine, because if your blood pressure goes up, don't you get angrier? Anyway, the Circus of Crime makes an appearance here, where the Ringmaster starts controlling the Hulk, and all the house ads, and of course all of the letter pages are included in here. Pretty much this is a recreation of the comic book. Circus of Crime will be returning later on. And then we get the fight against Mongu, but not before we are introduced to the concept, okay, now a machine can turn Hulk to this big creature. I'm sorry, turn the character of Dr. Bruce Banner into this the big creature known as the Incredible Hulk. And Rick Jones is the one that's helping him. Thunderbolt Ross is after him. And so we've had the Gargoyle, the Toadman, the Ringmaster, and the Circus of Crime. And then, of course, the fight against the Soviets, the capture of the Hulk, and then Mongu, who has a little bit of a twist with his character when there's an actual guy that walks out of this. So he's not quite as strong as you think, or as big as you might think he is. And I promise I'm not going to talk about each issue. I just kind of want to give you a tour of what to expect from here. This is the character of Tyrannus. And when I was a kid, I had the biggest problem pronouncing his name because I thought it was Tyrannus, which the Tyrannosaurus Rex was my favorite dinosaur. So I thought it was a take on that name, but it didn't even strike me to like think, oh, Tyrannus, like tyranny. And anyway, English was my second language, is my second language. So yeah, surely I couldn't have been the only kid that did that. But this is a sort of like his love triangle, because Betty Ross is interested in this guy who's like an archaeologist, but it turns out that he is just part of these group of people, these subterranean group of people. Does it sound a little bit like Namor? Of course it does. Yes, that's the whole point. But this is the fight between Bruce Banner and Tyrannus, and also the Incredible Hulk and the Subterranean People. Yes, that's right. You get to see Hulk not only wear the clown outfit, but also that. And in the 6th issue, which is the last issue before he got canceled, we get to see him fight the Metal Master. This time around, Steve Ditko is doing the artwork. And Ditko's Incredible Hulk is a little bit different than Kirby's Hulk. And then, of course, Kirby's Hulk differs between inker to inker. This is when the Hulk has to wear a mask because he's stuck with Bruce Banner's face and he has to fool the government. He has to fool the bad guys. Thunderbolt Ross is after him, and then we're introduced later on to General... Oh, what was it? No, General Fang was in issue number 5. We're introduced to Talbot later on. Now, the book gets canceled, and the Hulk does make appearances, like in the Fantastic Four, in the Avengers, but then we get Tales to Astonish, where he ends up sharing the magazine. So this is the Giant Man story that becomes a Hulk story. So both of them get to meet each other through here. And then eventually, starting with the next issue, he shares half the magazine. So this is the full story. Thunderbolt Ross still going after Dr. Bruce Banner. Betty Ross still thinking that Bruce is a good guy, doesn't know about the Hulk persona. And then in the next issue, it's split into 2. So for the rest of this, you're only going to be getting about, I want to say, like 10 pages of this stuff, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see, 9, maybe 12. Nope, 10 pages. So, because it was split. You had Giant Man, and then you had 10 pages of the Hulk. Eventually, he will be sharing the comic book with Namor the Submariner. But the house ads are still in here. So, rest assured you're still getting those. And, of course, the story just featuring the Hulk and the letter pages here. So, you've got issues 60 through 61. While Steve Ditko was drawing those, he was still working on Amazing Spider-Man, too. You had issue 62, which had him fight, speaking of Spider-Man, the Chameleon. And then we get hints as to this character known as the Leader. But he doesn't really show up until these issues 63 and 64, where you get to see how the gamma radiation has actually changed him into a creature that has a bigger brain capacity. He can think. He's not quite strong like the Hulk, but he thinks. So he makes his first introduction through here. So for the most part, that is, I mean, other than Thunderbolt Ross, who lives up to his name, believe me, he is the big villain that is introduced through this very first book, the Taschen book. I want to say first because I assume there's going to be more. Now that storyline continues, and you're going to be seeing more of the Leader through here. And this is the fights against the Soviets here, with, again, Talbot, and then, of course, Thunderbolt Ross and Betty taking a part into this whole story. And because there were 10 pages, they could continue into the next story arc. So here we have, like, our key players: General Ross, Betty Ross, Rick Jones, the Leader, Major Talbot, and Bruce Banner. A lot of these folks still thinking that, yes, that Bruce Banner and the Incredible Hulk are 2 different people. By now, you're going to see ads through here of different comics, like, oh my gosh, the Avengers and the X-Men. It's weird to think that, they canceled the Hulk, because also at the time, like, they were limited to how many books they could actually print, like publish, because it was a timely... they could only publish so many books, and then eventually when they became their own publishers, they could publish whatever the heck they wanted to. Jack Kirby comes back for these issues right here, and inked by Mickey DeMeo. And of course, the Leader comes back as well. And then this is where the title starts sharing room with Namor the Submariner. So even though the Hulk doesn't appear on the cover, all the covers are still intact here. And Jack Kirby does the pencils through here with different inkers. There's even some stuff in here by Kirby and Ditko, which I thought made for a beautiful, beautiful, perfect combination of both of them working together here. But this is now when Giant Man and the Wasp, the series, had ended, and pretty much going back to that concept of what makes the Hulk, and talking about, his complications of if Bruce Banner's supposed to, like, if he gets injured, does the injuries remain with the Hulk, or if he dies, well, the Hulk dies? It's just a lot of that they were exploring, because again, this is more of the time when they didn't really know what to do with this character at first, and then were trying to make things work before they relaunched his series with, I think it was issue 102, because, yeah, I think Tales went on to 101. Yeah. But it's really cool that they were exploring these things. If you want like a big historical look at the Incredible Hulk, this is the book to get. Like, this is where it all begins. And this is, the leader apparently is taken off the board for a while. Now we got this superhero soap opera, and this is Bill Everett actually starts joining team, and you're going to see the Incredible Hulk fighting different characters from the Marvel Universe. So no longer just sticking to his own characters, but Bill Everett doing the finishes. So, oh yeah, Kirby takes a step back and does a lot of the layout through here for the rest of the issues. So, I mean, he couldn't be everywhere at once. That is the fight against Hercules right there. And again, the covers, even without featuring the Hulk, are still intact through here. And there's Boomerang. Not to be confused with the... I actually really like this picture right here. It's Kirby and Everett. And Sam Rosen, that's Joe Rosen's brother, doing the lettering here. How could I forget to give him credit? I really like this. This looks awesome. Like Bill Everett doing the finishes. Probably not known as one of the best finishers for Kirby, but I really like what he brought to the table. And Talbot arguing with Thunderbolt Ross. Boomerang, not to be confused with the Spider-Man Boomerang, is what I was trying to say. And this is the last issue that is collected in here. So perhaps it'll be a volume 2. And then the history. So this is probably one of my favorite things that they do, because this tells you like the storylines, giving credit where credit is due, the pencils, the inks. And of course the colors back then went unfortunately uncredited. But it's really cool to see like who did what back then, as far as like what they can find. And then of course the back of the book right here, handled with care. This is the no price envelope. Some more blown up panels, and then the biographies on a lot of these wonderful creators of days gone by that are no longer with us. And then the behind the scenes here, and your end sheets. And your end sheets here are different than your end sheets at the beginning. So the binding, of course, is sewn binding, 670 pages, and again printed in different paper stock, including like the actual comics are printed different than over here. These comics have like a thick matte finish to it, and then of course the covers and some of these right here have a glossy finish to it. And it does come with a bookmark ribbon. Now what I want to do is compare it to, let's do the Epic Collection really quick. Let's go to issue number 1 to kind of show you the differences and do the Omni comparison and the Masterwork comparison. So we have the Epic Collection here, and this is volume 1. Just kind of show you the, first of all, the size difference, of course, just how much bigger it is. But one other thing to note is the colors. Now this is the colors from the Epic Collection compared to the colors here. And a lot of it has to do with the restoration. And speaking of restoration, I am going to compare it to the Masterwork. So let's actually do the Omni next. So we have the Omni right here. Let's open it up and scan the color. When I come back. Actually, let's go ahead and move to the next page. So you can see what the restoration exactly does. And then, of course, when it's printed in this glossy paper stock. It's the same thing that they do with the Epic Collections. But you can see the colors just being different, including like the skin tones, or fixing a lot of the bleeding from one color to the next color, which I was talking about when talking about his shirt. Like, even that looks different than over here, where it has like a grayish tone. And he looks, speaking of gray, a lot more gray over here than he does over here. One other thing they do, of course, is fix the mistakes like You don't see the teeth colored, whereas over here you do, and the same thing with the Hulk. It's just all gray right there. So little color mistakes like that are fixed in the restoration. Speaking of restoration, let's look at the most recent restoration, and that is found in the Remasterworks Volume 1, which was published in let's go to the next page, 2024. So last year it was published, and I want to get over here. Of course, the size of the book, right? It's different. It's a huge book. This is glossy paper stock. So to a lot of people, this is the way to collect them. Like, they love the restoration. Some people like the way they remember it. Really, it depends on the type of reader, the type of collector you are. You know, some people are like, why would you pay an outrageous amount of money for something that has this paper stock? Why don't you want glossy paper stock? I guess I don't know how to compare it, because it's unfair to compare it to like the special edition of Star Wars, because it is different, right? Because there is a lot of restoration that goes into these books. As you can see, like the gray is, again, it's like an orange gray color there. The blue or truest blue, where you can't see the little imperfections, if you will. But some people like the imperfections. So let's actually get to the Green Hulk in issue number 2 right here. Let's go there. Even the backgrounds look different from each other. These aliens are a lot more orange. Hulk is a lot more vibrant green. But that is the quick little comparison. And that, as they say, is that. And that was the content, the page count, and build of this book. Now, if you're interested in purchasing the book, I did leave a link in the description of the video where you can purchase it directly from Taschen. And remember, there's also a collector's edition. But that was my overview of this big, gigantic book. And let me know in the comments down below if you are enjoying these Taschen books, if you love the X-Men one, the Silver Surfer one, the Avengers one, the Spider-Man one, and you're hoping that they go through the entire Marvel catalog. It's going to get crazy. Or if you want them to touch upon like some of the stuff from the Bronze Age, or even some of the stuff from Modern Age. That would be pretty interesting to see it in this format, and what kind of paper stock they would use. If you have any questions, leave those down below. Smash that like button on the way out. Everyone stay healthy and safe out there. Much love.